Hello and welcome to our 7th edition of Table Talk. My name is Aaron Kornblit, and this is our weekly live stream where we cover one area of Airtable, answering your questions. So I'll just start off by saying I can't believe we've done this 7 times. It felt like yesterday that we first started, but I'm so excited that you're here with us. So I am seeing some familiar faces and some new faces. So Rebecca, Tommy, Derek, welcome back. Alex, regular, appreciate you joining as well. Coolvone is here, so I know I'm going to face some tough questions for sure. We've got some new faces as well, maybe first time in the chat, so welcome Andre, Stephanie, Penny, regular, welcome back. So really appreciate all of you joining. If this is your first time here, we have this Table Talk every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern, where we answer your questions about an area of Airtable. And today I'm particularly excited to talk about collaboration. So as I kick this off, whether you're new or this is your 7th time joining, tell us where you're joining from in the chat. And I'd love to know, like, who do you collaborate with? Like, is it your team members, consultants? Who do you work with? Tell me a little bit about your use case in the chat, and I'm gonna make sure to cover that throughout. Now, before we start, some things that are good to know. My colleague is gonna include a link in the chat for you to ask questions. So maybe you submitted some before, but have some throughout Table Talk. Feel free to fill that out. As always, we're gonna draw some swag. So Tommy was a winner, I think a couple of weeks ago, and I don't think he's taken that shirt off since. And so yeah, do fill out. We're gonna draw that after we answer everybody's questions at the end. Third and final form you can fill out is the option of winning a consultation with one of our Airtable experts. So if you're like, hey, how do I structure this base? I have some questions and I really want to speak to an expert, make sure to fill out that form as well. You can do that throughout Table Talk. Awesome. Cool. So we've got Derek from New Orleans, Stephanie from Charlotte, for a donor database. Love that example. So definitely some interesting collaboration of folks within your team and some external collaborators. And we're going to talk all about that right now. So let's jump into our base here. Let's see what we're going to talk about today. So our first question is very easy. Hallie asks, how can I collaborate with my team in Airtable? So we're going to start there, just the basics of collaboration. How do you invite folks? What are some options within Airtable to assign things to people, comments, things like that. Then we're going to talk about permission levels, and we're going to go deep into permission levels. So I actually have this cool kind of exercise where we're going to go through every possible permission level as if we were that type of collaborator. Then we're going to talk about external collaborators, so folks who don't necessarily need access to your whole base. And finally, I'm going to give you my tips and tricks. And when I say my, I mean sourced from our Airtable experts who work with large clients and large teams and even small teams as well all the time. So they've given me their best tips and tricks of getting folks onboarded into a new base. So yeah, really excited. We've got 4 questions. I wanted to leave space on the agenda today to take your questions. So we had some feedback. So I do want to kind of have your questions. So go ahead, fill out the form. If you have any question, we're going to highlight them and add them to this agenda in real time throughout Table Talk. So hey, Amanda, hey, FinSuite, happy to have you here. Excited for you guys to join. So yeah, so let's dive into our first question very simply, which is how can I collaborate with my team in Airtable? So we're going to be working out of this base where we manage campaigns around a furniture company. I wanted to show a base that you're probably familiar with if you've been on Table Talk. If you haven't, very simple base. We've got the products that, the pieces of furniture that are launching. For every launch, we create a campaign, and then those campaigns have pieces of content, right? So for instance, for this dual extension table, we're gonna create 4 pieces of content for the different channels that we're targeting. So Twitter, Facebook, blog, and Instagram. And then in the content pipeline, if I go to the Kanban view, we track the status of each piece of content. So this is a team endeavor. We've got the product team scheduling launches for products, and then us deciding which channels we want to target, creating these records so that we can track the creation of the content and then sending it out. So quite a complex workflow with many moving pieces and many team members. So let's talk a little bit about how to collaborate in Airtable. So basic what you need to know is when you create a base, you can invite people to that base. So let's say you're starting out an Airtable, you've created your base, it's good to go, and you want to invite your first collaborator. How you do that is by clicking the share button at the top right. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Then you have the option of inviting someone to the workspace. If there are any questions about workspaces, I'm happy to answer those. Go ahead and drop those into the form. But we really want to focus on the base aspect today. So base means I want to invite this person into my base, into where our team works. And then I just simply invite them. So I'm going to go ahead and use Sohail, one of our team members, as an example throughout today. And then I can give them a level of permission. This will tell Sohail what they have access to. And we're going to dive deep into that and the second question. For now, I'm going to invite Sohail as an editor, and we'll talk about what that is in a bit. And very kind of overlooked feature here, you can add a message. And this actually I highly recommend because just getting an email to say, hey, you're invited to Airtable without any context can be jarring. It might have that person avoid or not actually go in and explore Airtable. So I'm just going to write this quick message to Sohail, say, hey, Sohail, this is where our team manages campaigns. As a campaign manager, you should work primarily in the campaigns table. More information in the base. There we go. I could send that invite. And now you'll see here that Sohail is a base collaborator. Now what's important to know in Airtable, when you invite someone into your base, they get access to all the information in your base. And the ability they have to edit information or create things is dependent on their permission level. So I've just invited Sohail. What can I actually do with this once I've invited Sohail? Well, one thing I can do is assign campaigns or records, depending on your example, to Sohail. So let me unhide. I think I have a collaborator field. I do not. Let me go ahead and create a campaign owner field. And so this is going to be a collaborator type field. And I'm not going to notify when they're added. And this is a drop down that you autofills everyone you've invited to your base. So now you'll see Sohail is available here, and I could say Sohail is assigned to this specific campaign, and that is automatic based on everyone that you've invited. You can also tag people in comments. So let's say I've just invited Sohail. I've let them know that this is where we manage campaigns. I've assigned Sohail to a specific campaign. And here I can tag them to say, hey, Sohail, this is the first campaign you'll be managing. Let me know if you have any questions. Now, so Sohail has received a notification because they've been invited to Airtable, and I could have given them a notification when I've assigned them to a record. And now there's a comment that will also tag them to let them know that there's a comment in a record that is for them, and they automatically watch the record, meaning any comments will notify them as well. So that is just the kind of basic mechanics of inviting people to Airtable. So I already see a comment in the chat around sharing folks, so parts of bases, and we're going to get to that in the third question. So in Airtable, when you invite someone, you have to give them a level of permission. Do recommend adding a message to let them know what you're inviting them to. And once you've invited them, they are then available in every collaborator field and can be tagged in comments where you can chat about what it is you're working on. So that was just the basic mechanics. I wanted everyone to kind of start on the same foot and make sure that everyone understands how to invite people in Airtable. So do appreciate that question, Hallie. All right, so for folks who are new, we have confetti after every question. And for folks who are longtime fans, I'm sure this is your favorite part of Table Talk. It is definitely mine. So let's go ahead and set this as answered. Amazing. And I've also, I took my own advice. This is tea for today, and this is water. So if I have a primary key for my cups. Very important because I don't want to get burnt. So this is tea. There we go. Okay. Okay, so second questions. What options do I have for controlling permission levels in Airtable? So when I invited Sohail a moment ago, as you noticed here, let me share this. When I invite someone, I have an option of 4 different levels of permission that I can assign to them. And this will dictate how many things they can do in Airtable, and really going to go granular to each one so you can understand them. And I don't know about you, but one thing that I've learned working in Airtable is that I always get invited as a creator, right? So I work at Airtable. Obviously, people invite me to their base. They're not worried about me doing something that I shouldn't, or they actually want me to build bases. And so often what happens is creators, folks like yourselves, are always creators. So you don't necessarily know the nuances of what it is an editor, a commenter, a read-only collaborator can do. And frankly, I didn't until I kind of spent time in creating and seeing what an Airtable base feels like as each one of these levels of permission. So that's actually what I want to do with you today, where we explore the same base from the point of view of different levels of permission, so we can really understand what that type of permission level can do. So first is the creator level. This is what we've always been working in Table Talk. I've always been a creator. And so what this means, I can do anything in the base. And what I mean by that is I can create views. I can create views here. I can create records. I can change any table to add views, to remove views. Really, as a creator, I have full access on the base. So at the base level, I can create tables. I can create records. I can create views. I can change automations. I can add them, delete apps. So really, as a creator, you have full control. You are the builder of the base, and you are the decider of what happens in it. Now, the level under that, if you will, or the level with less permission is editor. So let's actually go here into this same base, but from the point of view of an editor. So the first thing you'll notice is that you can create records, you can edit records, and that's the editor, right? So what that means is I can change the status of a campaign, I can update dates, I can change information. However, I don't have that control around changing the base. So what I mean by that is I can't change any field. I also can't add fields. So as an editor, I don't have control over the structure of the base. And this level of permission is perfect for someone who doesn't need to control the structure of the base. And it's great, maybe you're working with a content writer who needs to update information, but doesn't necessarily need to start thinking about, oh, do we need a formula field here? Could we add a lookup? And it's really, so editor is perfect for those collaborators who are doing the work, but you don't expect to build the base alongside you. So that was one. So you can add records, you can edit information in the base, but you cannot add new fields. One thing is that you can create new views. So let's say I want to create a view, and I can call this, Sohail's view. And I'm going to filter where I call this campaign. Oh no, that's in another base. So let's say where team, or where, let's say overhead greater than 1,000. There we go. And let's call this large projects. Okay, so large projects is everything over $1,000. As an editor, I can create those views, but I cannot unlock other views. So we're gonna get into view permissions in a moment. So I have this locked view, which is locking means that editors and anyone below creator cannot unlock the view to change its configuration. So you can create views, but you cannot unlock the locked views made by others. And so this is great if you have a team level view, right? So here, since we have a grid view where we have every campaign organized by status, and we've locked it, that way editors can't go in and say, oh, I want to filter out things or things like that. This is a team level view that cannot be changed. So there's some questions around permissioning and talking about personal views. I'm happy to get into that. That said, I would recommend the views table talk, where we dive deep into view configuration. So I'm just checking. Okay, and one thing, as an editor, you can view existing automations and apps, but you cannot add new ones. So let's say I wanted to add an app, let's say a page designer. Editors cannot add apps, dashboards, configure automations. So an editor's role is really updating information, but not deciding the structure of the base, not deciding the apps that go on top, or the automations that run within that base. Our third, right? So we've talked about creator, we've talked about editor. The third is a commenter. So these are folks who both need visibility into the information in the base, but do not need to edit information, but can comment, right? So in this case, let's say I'm a commenter. What I can do is you can see I can't edit any of the information. I can see it. I can see all the information in the base, but I can comment and say Sohail, right? Taylor, what is the status here? So that is the limit of what I can do. I can comment on records. I can see the information, but I cannot edit any of it. And obviously I can't add apps, dashboards, and things like that. And the final one, and the lowest and least permissioned, if you will, is the read only. So this means that you can view all of the information in the base. You cannot edit or update any of the information. And if we expand a record, you cannot comment it either. Now, the thing to know about read only is that if you're on the pro plan, read only are not billed. So that means you are not being charged for those read only collaborators. And that is particularly useful if you give someone access to your information, but not necessarily give them any edit rights. Okay, so we've gone through creator, editor, commenter, and read only. And I'm happy if there are any questions around these specific. I'm going to keep these open that we can switch between all the different types. Now, the last thing I want to say here is that these are rigid. And so what I mean by that is you've noticed that there are these, as an editor, you can edit all tables and all fields. However, you can limit that. So what I mean by that is you can have table and field level permissions. So let's say in my campaigns table, right now, by default, everyone who's an editor or a creator has the ability to edit information in this base. But maybe I want to say, you know what, only specific people can edit information in my campaigns table. Maybe it's only the campaign managers. Or I want to say, actually, I only want to keep that to creators, and I'll only give the creator status to our campaign managers. So how you do that is in this little arrow, say edit table permissions. And there are two options here. You can say, I can say creators and up. This meaning that everyone who has creator or creator status or level of permissions can edit the information, but I can say specific users and say, well, Gio and myself are the only two campaign managers, and we are the only two people who should be updating information in this specific table. And same logic for who can delete records. So maybe you want to allow people to delete records but not create them. You can do that in the table permissions. Now, last thing here is that maybe you want to have that same logic at the field level. So maybe I want to edit the field permissions of status to only say, well, who can edit these values? Maybe it's only creators and up. Maybe it's specific users. So coming back to those two campaign managers. Or I can say nobody. No one is allowed to edit this information. So let's go back to the default. So that's just an example of field permissions at the table and field level. So I'm seeing some questions here. Oh, one thing, I do see a question that I want to address, which is, can I create views as a commenter? So the answer is yes, but you can only create personal views. So what that means is if I create a grid view, so let's say commenter view, you'll notice that by default, it's a personal view, which means that I can see it, only I can edit the configuration of this view, and other people can see my view, but you cannot create collaborative views. So that was just one thing I wanted to add. There we go. And now we've talked about the 4 levels of permissioning: creator, editor, commenter, read-only, right? So editor and up can edit information. Creator and up can create the structure of the base. and commenter can comment, and read-only can see information. If that structure is too rigid or isn't exactly what you look like or you want, you can update at the table and field level permissions at that level of granularity. So Rebecca didn't know that there were field permissions. Love it. So I'm glad at least I've taught you one thing, and that's really great. So time for some confetti. So Emenda asks the owner field, and that's actually a workspace level type level of permission that has the same permission as creator, but the owner can decide other people's workspace level. So as the owner, you can downgrade a creator to other levels, and every workspace needs at least one owner. So do wanted to just quickly address that. Owner is at the workspace level, not something that's at the base level. Happy to get into workspace later in the sessions. Cool. Okay, so I think it was Emenda. Our third question here today is, what about collaborators who don't need access to my whole base? And this happens often. So maybe it's an external team, right, that needs update on the latest products or on the latest campaigns, but you don't necessarily want to give them access to all of the content or all the launches or all of the information in your base. It could be folks who just need to give you information, right? So maybe we had a donor database example in the chat. Those folks who are donating don't necessarily need access to, well, everyone else who's donating. So you have this ability to decide who are internal users who need access to the whole base and who should either have access to part of the base or putting information into the base. So let's talk about both of those. So the first example I want to talk about is, what if you want to give people access to a part of your base? So the example I have in mind is, let's say I want to give folks access to all campaigns that we've run. So I want people to see, the different campaigns, what products they're related to, what season. So I want to give folks access to this gallery view, but I don't want to give them access to the whole base. So I don't want them to have access to launches, content pipeline, team. I only want them to have access to this information. So here in the view configuration, right, I've customized it to show exactly what I want. I have the option to share the view. So when I share this creates a URL that anyone can visit, and that they can see the information in this view, but they do not have access to the rest of my base. So a few configurations that are important here. One example is showing all fields in expanded records. What that means is when they would click on the record, they would get access to all the fields, not only to the ones that I've shown on the card. That's up to you to decide how much information you want to give. You can set a password or restrict access to specific email domains. So let me just go ahead and create this shared gallery view. I'm going to go ahead and drop it into the chat. So let me copy paste that link. You can go ahead and check it out. For some reason, it's not letting me copy paste. There we go. So I've just shared that with the team. If someone could drop that into the chat, I would really appreciate that. And we can actually go on that URL. So what's important here is that anyone accessing this URL, as I'm including it in the chat, has access to the information in this specific view and any updates. So let's say I'm actually going to filter. So I'm going to condition on status is any of, and I'm going to say building or live. There we go. And if I come back here and refresh, you'll see that this is updated. So anytime you update information in your base, any new visitors to that shared view URL will be able to see your information up to date, right? Very important to remember that you have to refresh it, right? So if you're looking at the URL and you do a change, you actually have to refresh to see the updated change. And this is one way of sharing information, part of your base. And you could share any view. Any type of view in Airtable can be shared externally, can have a URL assigned to it that folks can visit. And last thing here is you can also embed it on your website. So if there's any interest, I'm happy to share some examples of what an embedded view could look like. But if you click this, it gives you the code that you copy paste into your website that you can embed. And this is really useful if you're maybe embedding a calendar, right, for an event or a talk, and or you're managing your information in Airtable. You can go ahead and include an embedded view of that information onto your website very easily. Okay, great. So that was the first part. So what if people need access to part of your base? You can use a shared view. However, that's not the only thing you want people to do. Often you want people to input information and not necessarily have access to the rest of your information. So coming back to that donor example, where if someone's submitting information, name, email, I want to attend your event, you don't want to give them access to any part of your base, but what you do want to do is have them fill out information. So to do that in Airtable, you use a form view. So here I have a campaign request form. So imagine I want to give folks in my company the ability to request a campaign for a specific piece of furniture. What I can do is create a form. I've already done that here, and then pick which fields they should fill out. So what I've said is I want them to pick the product that they want a campaign around, what channels do they think we should focus on, and when they think the campaign should start. And here I creates a URL. Same options here. I can restrict with an email or a password. And it creates this form that folks can fill out. So I can select a product, do an extension table, want to focus on Facebook and Instagram, and when should the campaign start? 25th. You can submit that. And this is going to fill out my base with that information and not give that person any access to the rest of the information. So coming back here, if I go into all campaigns, there we go. We have that campaign that person asked us to run. Great. Now, last pro tip here is you can actually use both together, right? So you can use forms and shared views together in a way that I find particularly useful and cool, which is you can add a button that links to the form. So if we go to that shared view, let me go open that up. You'll notice here that there's a request campaign button. So this is great. Let's say you have a gallery of speakers for your event and someone watching or looking at that says, hey, you know what? I want to go to this event. You can have a button that says, well, do you want to sign up for our event? And when someone clicks on it, it links to your form. So how I've done this is actually let's go ahead and go back to my base. Let's click here. Let's go into that campaign request. Let's edit the field. And you'll notice what I've done is I've created a button that opens the form URL that we created a moment ago. And so you can create a form, add it to a button so folks get a place to see the information, and then instantly, if they're interested, fill out a form to say, hey, I want to go to your event. I want to request a campaign. This looks cool. And if you're Coolphone or an Airtable expert, you can pre-fill that with information from the record. So I'll let folks in the chat drop a link on how to do that, but you can actually pre-fill this with information from the record or about the user to make that form fill out easier. So that is in Airtable how you collaborate, how you share a part of your base. And then with Airtable forms, how do you get people to submit information into your base without having access to the rest of the information? Last thing here, these were small but mighty questions that folks asked. I saw a question come out, which is, what is the difference between shared views and sync? So we're going to talk about sync next week. We're going to have a full session, full episode on sync, single source sync, multi-source syncs, all that cool stuff. So we're going to talk about that next week. But really quickly, the difference between sync and shared views is the fact that sync lives in your Airtable base. So here I have a sync from another base where I have all of that information. And what that allows me to do is add additional information. So these little fields with lightning bolts mean that the information is coming from another source, but these fields are that I've created. So with Sync, you can augment your workflow with information coming from elsewhere, whereas a shared view is just somewhere where you can access the information. And it's important to remember that with a Sync view, everyone who has access to your base has access to that Sync table as well. But they do work together. So you can often sync a shared view to bring it into your Airtable base and stay up to date with any updates to that information. Whew, okay. Let me know if there's any questions in the chat. Love that. This was a big question. Cool. Boom. So is this tea or is this water? So who remembers which one this is? Let me know. Amazing. Okay. Okay, so another Dana asks us a big question. Coffee. I believe in the video it was coffee, and the red is tea. So I think Kuvan, you are correct. This is tea. This is definitely tea. No, it was tea and coffee in the video. But I'm excited enough on Table Talk that I don't bring on coffee. That would be too much. So I just bring on this common tea. It's also really cold here in Canada, or in Montreal anyway. Okay, our fourth question. How can I help my team get the most out of my base and make sure we're working together effectively? How to onboard a team member? How do you collaborate in an Airtable base? I think what's most important, and this is what I'm getting folks who work very closely with large clients and small clients from the Airtable team and folks who do that regularly talk to me about, which is giving people context, as much information as possible so they understand the Airtable base, but also the role that they have to play in that Airtable base. Now, it's important if you get dropped into an Airtable base you have little context about, it can feel very disorienting or intimidating. So it's important to give them as much context as you can to help them and orient them around how should I interact with this base? Which fields should I be updating? Which fields should I not update? Which ones are tied to automations? And really give folks as much context as you can so they feel comfortable understanding how to interact with this space. So what I want to show you a little bit is how do you provide that context? What are some tips and tricks to provide context into a new team member coming into the base? So we've talked about a few before, right? Which is the share message right here. So adding a message when you're inviting someone to your base. But let's go a little further and really give people context into understanding how to work in your base. So the first one I want to talk to you about is the base description. So right here, when you're new to a base, this automatically pops up. So the first time you come to a base, you'll see this base guide, and it's been updated recently to make it larger first, and second, to give you guidance into what to write in this base description. So what I particularly like to give folks is a high-level explainer of every table and who interacts with each table how, right? So one example is I mentioned that the launches table comes from the product team and that most people don't need to interact with that table. In the campaigns table, I say that these is where campaign managers primarily work, and really give a rundown of every field and just general information that is really useful for folks coming into a base. I also include dashboards, talking about what dashboards might be relevant to different types of stakeholders, right? So particularly useful for campaign managers. Another pro tip here is you can also link to things in that description. Let me go into it. You'll notice that I've created these little markdown links. So you put between brackets what you want the text to be, and then in parentheses, put the link that folks should go to when they click on it. So this can be very useful to linking internally in Airtable to a specific table. Let me go back. Let me just like that. But also externally. So maybe you want to say, hey, Table Talk is awesome. You should definitely go listen to Table Talk before jumping into Airtable, or you have other resources, internal, external, that you want to link from directly from your base. Extremely useful to give as much context as possible to folks around your base. So first, do leverage the base description. So that was the first one. The second is maybe you want to give an onboarding dashboard to folks so that they understand what this Airtable base does, right? So most folks will not go, or not, they won't, but after that first time they may X out of it, and you want to give them additional context. Well, you can go into apps, and one particular tip is giving folks a welcome dashboard and overview. In here, I have a description app that, well, for me, has the same information from that base description, but you can include anything in this description to give folks, again, context into the base that they're working out of. So those are just two ways to provide kind of high-level text, but often what I would also recommend is within the base itself, giving as much context to people as possible. So let's go ahead and say, well, in every table and every field and every view, you can add a description. So here in the campaigns table, when you hover over it, I explain what the campaign table is for. And that's important when folks are just new to the base. They might be just hovering their mouses and really understanding what happens in this base. You can add view descriptions. You can also do that at the field level. So if you go to all campaigns, I've explained here the status field where I explain what each status or each select option means. So that's another way at the field level you can add descriptions. You can also do it at the view level. So let me go ahead and create a field. There we go. Let me just add a description here. And say main view for all team members to understand campaign status and initiatives. I can save that description. And now when someone's over, they can hover over, see that description. And same thing here, when they hover over, they see that description. So very important descriptions. And I see Kuvon kind of echoing this. When you start working in large bases with a lot of people, extremely important to always provide context into what it is they should be looking at and what it is they are looking at so they understand their role. And from before, making sure that everyone has the right permissions. So maybe someone who shouldn't be able to create views, well, shouldn't be an editor, or really having good hygiene around that. The last tip I want to give you is using not only text. Me as someone, I don't necessarily read all the text in the description, but one thing I do react to is emojis, right? So having emojis to bring people's attention, but also to have a emoji kind of dictionary for your team. So for instance, here I have a little lightning bolt to say that an automation is tied to this field. And every field that when changed triggers automations, you can add a little lightning bolt emoji. Maybe for you, it's a siren, something like that for providing context. And when you hover over, I also explain what that automation is. So very useful to add emojis in your fields, in your tables, in your views, and really create a common language with everyone and explain it as well so folks understand what it is that they need to do in your Airtable base. Whew. Okay. There was a question around syncing, which I'll get to in a bit, but that was how to orient people around your base. So just summarizing those tips. First, base description. Second, creating a welcome dashboard with all of the information that someone would need to orient themselves in the base. And third, making sure you're providing context within the base itself, using base descriptions, field descriptions, views description, having emojis, and really bringing people's attention to what they should be doing and what can be done in your Airtable base. Cool. Okay. Amazing. Some tea. Amazing. Okay. Okay, how can colleagues not in Airtable stay up to date with any changes to the base or specific fields? This is a question from Molly. Great question. We do have some time, so it's not going to be the speed round. So the first is shared views, which we mentioned, right? So let's say I create a shared view. like this. I have this all campaigns. I can share that view. And if I open that view right here, what's unfortunate about, not unfortunate, but with the limitation of this view is that I actually need to go to this view to see the information, right? So this maybe I go every week, but the onus is on the viewer to know when things are changed. And not only that, but when I come to it, I may not remember what it is it was before, right? Maybe I'm like, was Nebula Chair in building last week? I don't remember what the change is. So the way I'm interpreting your question, Molly, is how can I give people updates on changes, but also give them context, right? So maybe I want to tell them, hey, you should look at the shared view because we've updated. Here's what's been updated. And by the way, here's the rest of the context that you need. And I'm also not going to give you access to the whole base. So if I'm understanding your question correctly, what I would recommend is using Airtable automations. So let's imagine I want to send an update. And my trigger in this case might be whenever the status of a campaign changes. So when record updated. So what I'm saying, when a record in my campaigns table has a status change, send a Slack notification or an email to the team letting them know that a change has happened. Here's what the change is, and here's a view where you can see the rest of the context. So I can go to my campaigns table and say only send updates when the status changes. So this says, okay, trigger this automation whenever a record is updated, and specifically only trigger it when there's a status change in any of the records. There we go. And then we could send an email, send a Slack message. Let me just do a send message. So I'm going to go to my social campaigns and they say the status of a campaign has changed. This is the change. And I can bring in information from step one. So I can say the campaign name, like this, campaign name, and I can add additional fields. But what's also interesting is I can include the URL of a shared view, right? So I can say this campaign has changed. To get more information, go to this URL. So I can copy paste that and say more information in this shared view. Like that. And now, not only does the person get notified when there are important changes that you've specified, but you can also bring them to an area where they have context, but not necessarily have all of the access to all of the information in your base. Great. Awesome. Well, hope that helps. Hopes that, Molly, let me know if there are any further questions, but this is how I'd recommend giving folks updates on changes, but also giving them context so they're not updating a view and kind of wondering what's updated. Great. So let me go ahead and mark this as done. Okay. Okay, so question from Coolvone. Is how can I delete a locked personal view of someone who is no longer a base collaborator? So I think Coolvone asked a great question, which I think is a limitation today, where if I create a personal view and I am no longer a collaborator on the base, if I turn on show everyone's personal views, I will see a kind of ghost view, if you will. And today, I think, if I'm not mistaken, let me know in the chat if that's the case, you cannot delete that view because you do not have access to it. I am also getting word that we're going to fix that. So do expect an update which will allow reassigning personal views soon enough. So yeah, that's it. That's the update. You can't do it today. It's coming, and we'll let you know when it's the case. But really appreciate that question, Coolvone, and thanks for highlighting that kind of a gray area situation that I'm sure happens a lot when you have a ton of collaborators and a little bit of turnover in your Airtable base. Cool. Yeah. Okay. This is my. They've told me a new feature whenever I do this, so I should have got my AirPods next time. Cool. Okay. So coming soon. Amazing. So one last thing before, so now's a good time. If you've forgotten, go ahead and fill out the swag form. Go ahead and submit questions. I'm going to stay 1 minute here with one question that I wanted to do, and then we're going to jump into drawing the swag. So do you want to give you a few minutes to fill out the form? One thing that was, I think I saw it in the chat, or maybe somewhere, someone mentioned, can I provide learners resources in my base? And I actually think that's a really good example for Airtable Sync. So let's say you are in your Airtable base. Let me close out some stuff. And you want to create a Learn Airtable table, right? So maybe for folks who are new in orientation, so they can learn Airtable. We actually have this Airtable education that has some of the basic webinars that folks can go to and some resources that are great for starting in Airtable, and a specific webinar on collaborations. So what you can do is open that shared view and then use this data in one of your bases. So create a synced table from airtable.com/learn into that base. So let me go ahead and, this is in my streams workspace, and the base is called collaboration. There we go. And I can create that sync table. This means that anytime something is updated here, it will be reflected in my Airtable base. Let me group this by training topic like that. And let's add a description and say great resources for learning Airtable. Start here if you're new to the tool. There you go. And now you have, whenever we update with new resources, they'll be automatically synced into your Airtable base. I know it's something I do in bases where I expect to invite a lot of folks who are maybe a little new to Airtable or who need a little bit of help getting started. So great resource, airtable.com/learn. Okay, there we go. So without further ado, seems like we have no more questions. Team, let's go ahead and draw this week's swag. If you're late, go ahead and fill it out now. We're going to draw it in the next minute. And while we're waiting for that draw, what are you up to this weekend? What are you looking forward to? Go check out also, we just launched What's New in 2 this morning, where we talk about advanced filter, a new update to automations, the fact that Airtable scripting and the SDK will be free forever. So if you are a script adept, if you like writing scripts or just learning, do check out What's New in 2. Always a great time of month. I love it when we launch that video. So Rebecca, building Airtables, love it. Take a break sometimes. It's okay. You do that, I'm sure, every day. It's okay to take a break over the weekend, but love the enthusiasm. Yeah, definitely free scripting forever is great. As someone who learned how to write a little bit of JavaScript, yeah, but Kovon, if you do write scripts, make sure to share them with the community as you always do. I read your scripts and I take inspiration from them. Great. So who's this week's winner? Next week we're gonna have a drum roll sound. Or the Jeopardy kind of dun, 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 dun. A drum roll. Yeah, so Stephen, if you want to learn how to write scripts, we did 4 sessions called Learn Airtable Scripting. We have a winner. So Derek is this week's winner. Derek, huge congratulations. You're going to get an email, automated email from me in about 10 minutes with where you can go and get your swag. So welcome to a tight circle, a small circle of swag winners. If you didn't win this week, that's okay. We'll be back next week talking all about Airtable Sync, a whole session on Airtable Sync, learning about single source sync, multi-source sync, all the things you can do with Airtable Sync. Cool. Well, that is this week's Table Talk. Huge thanks for you all joining. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your Thursday to come learn and meet other Air tablets around collaboration. So we'll be back next week with Sync. I'll be back here next week with Sync, and I hope you are too. So with that, have a great week, have a great weekend, and keep building those Airtable bases. Have a great week, everyone. Bye.